This is your host, Ronnie Fernandez, LCSW, licensed clinical therapist and owner of Ronnie Fernandez Therapy, but for guys. If you want to know more about me and my private practice, go to ronniefernandez.com. Hello and welcome to Mindset, the Guy podcast, where men talk about their life challenges and how they were able to overcome them. My goal with this podcast is to help men better express their thoughts and develop a mindset to better deal with their life challenges. This podcast is not clinical therapy. The men that I interview are not my clients, but have great stories on how they were able to develop a mindset to conquer their challenges. I'm not a professional interviewer or host, so please forgive me for all the pauses, and misplaced words. With that being said, let me introduce you to my next guest. Rick Rodriguez is the president and CEO of RMI International, Inc., founder and CEO of Living Tree Foundation that assists returning veterans, and current mayor of Downey, California. Rick talks about his journey from being a young father and then developing into a business owner, and then finding a purpose through serving others. Now here's Rick. Rick, I just want to thank you for joining me in this podcast, and
yes, sir.
I just thank you for joining me and being able to share your story with me.
Yep, absolutely. What an honor. Thank you.
All right, we'll just go ahead and dive right into it.
Okay.
Just want to talk about you becoming a young father.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just tell me how your life looked like, and kind of the background before you became a father?
So I was going to private school. I lived. My family wasn't a poor family. We were a rich family. We were upper middle class. There were 6 kids. Mom and dad both worked multiple jobs, but it was all through private school. We all had cars. We all had played sports. Nobody was involved in gangs. Nobody got involved in drugs. Nobody did that stuff. In my generation of family members and with my siblings, we all just worked hard. We worked hard from the time we were 16. I remember 16 was the age you can get a job and get your license. So that was like the forecast. If you were a freshman, you couldn't wait to be that guy that was 16, get a job and a license. And so I became a father shortly thereafter. And so right at the end of my senior year, I became a father. And so I was excited. I didn't think about the idea of, oh, this is terrible, my life's over. I never thought about that. My 2 older brothers were great fathers. They're great grandfathers now. They're great fathers, and I want to be like them. I saw them how they were, they were fathers with their kids. I said, man, even though I'm a lot younger, it's my turn. I'm going to be a dad too. So I think the best way to describe parenthood to start is excitement. Yeah.
And how did it go when during that whole process of your wife having a baby, and how was that?
Well, again, you're 18 years old, 19 years old, and you're having a baby, and you're still a kid yourself. People look at you that way. They look at you like, this dumb kid doesn't know anything. And so, your parents have to help a lot. My mom and dad helped me a lot, and so they were able to help us with housing. My parents owned rental property, so they're able to help us with a rental space to live. And but right then you don't have time to say, one day I'll be a lawyer, one day I'll be a doctor. I think the next 10 or 15 years and figure it out education-wise. You have to go to work right then. Once you hear that, guess what, I'm pregnant, okay, I need to get serious about a job. And so with the high school education, your career path is limited. You're limited to loading trucks, unloading trucks, loading boxcars, washing dishes, manual labor jobs. And so as your career path at that moment is limited, that right then and there you say, okay, it's basic math. If I work 8 hours, and if I'm fortunate enough to make $5 or $6 an hour, I need more money. I got to work 3 more 8-hour jobs. So there's not a lot of time for sleep. And so you learn to put your hustle on. You learn to hustle nonstop. And that's just what I did from that time.
What are some of the challenges that you found being a young father?
I think that, in growing up myself, at that time, I think, I was very fortunate that, my first child was a boy. And so he and I became instantly connected at the hip. So, he and I became, his day, he'll be 40 years old this December. And we're still that way, but I think that, the biggest challenges were How do you raise a family and be home and then have to put in 16, 18 hours a day in your job? So, and when you're home, you're tired. And so you have to kind of find that face, find that smiling face. So when your kids are, hey, Dad, look at this. Hey, Dad, let me show you this. You're like, okay, sure. Let me engage you while I really am trying to rest, because another 3 hours I have to go back to work.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And what are some of the things? Well, how were you able to kind of maneuver through that with limited education, with with having a growing family?
Yeah.
How was your mindset with that?
Well, I just knew one thing. I knew that, I had to work. There was no excuses. Fortunate for me, my two older brothers left our home right after senior year and went away after college. So they kind of set the template. That was what we're supposed to do. I didn't do that. I got married right out of high school, and then I started work right out of high school. So I only knew that my end game would be at some point in time get some type of education that could change my career path from, being a guy that works the loading docks or being the guy that cuts grass or washing cars. So I needed something. Well, I was probably 18, 19 years old. I met a guy who was a deputy sheriff, and then he told me, hey, look, at my wife is an HR manager for a security company. You ever thought about working in security until you turned 21? I said, no, I hadn't. So he helped me, and I knew nothing about it. I was 19 years old, and they gave me a job. And I started working. And I realized that all the senior management people were people that had more education or law enforcement or military experience. So I said, okay, I need to find some way to achieve that. And so that's how I launched from there.
Can you talk more a little bit about that on just kind of, because I've seen where a lot of people just kind of stay at that position.
Yeah.
While loading, working on the docks, you earn pretty good money.
Sure.
Like,
yeah.
What helped you kind of like, look, I need to do more than this, or I need to achieve, get higher in the ranks.
I'll never forget. I'll tell you a quick little story. I had a guy that he was our shop steward or our foreman, and I was loading trucks in the City of Commerce. I was loading trucks, and then they had at preschool, they had a parent day at preschool. So I went to go and I took time away from work. I worked swing shift. So I asked my boss, can I be gone for a couple hours so I can hurry up and go there and come back and finish your truck? Said, okay. So I did that, and I was dressed in dock working clothes and dirty Levi's and work boots and gloves and a T-shirt. And I sat there, and then in the classroom of my son's classroom was a bunch of people that are professional, wearing suit and tie, wearing business attire. And they went around the room, and they all said what they did. They all had professional jobs, except for me. And I was the only guy in the room that was a manual labor guy. And I was so embarrassed at that moment that I went back and I went to load the trucks. And instead of loading the trucks, carefully and gently, as you stack boxes, I was throwing boxes in the back of the truck. I was so angry, frustrated, mad at life overall. And this guy, who was my boss, walked up to me and he said, hey, he says, what's your problem? This I told him. And he says, listen, you're not visiting your kids, or kids aren't visiting you through a glass window. Your kids aren't coming to see you on one day a week in some jail or prison or hospital bed. You're able to earn your salary and work and support your family. So you had nothing to be ashamed of. And I said, okay. I didn't really buy into it at that moment, but I never forgot that story. And then maybe 15 years later, I had already started a business, and I was just starting to grow the company, and we had a workers' compensation audit, and the state fund came to our office and came to audit our books for our employee records and how much we pay for workers' compensation insurance. And so this lady was in my wife's office, and she's going through all of our books and accounting, do our head count for number of employees. And I noticed on her laptop, it had the last name Wolfe, Wolfe at the end. I guess that was my old boss's name. I never seen that name spelled with an E at the end. So I told her, we were talking, and I said, guys, I knew a guy 15 years ago. I knew a guy that used to be my boss, and his name was John Wolfe. And she was like, guys, I never knew whatever happened to him. My life changed, and I'm here now, the owner of this small little company. She goes, John Wolf, huh? Yeah. And where did you work? And I told her. And she goes, that's, can I borrow your phone? I said, sure. So right there, my wife's desk, she picked up the phone. She called. She said, hey, John, you remember this guy, Rick Rodriguez? And so he says, yeah, he's getting out with a big head. And so he says, yeah, a guy with a bunch of little kids. She goes, yeah. She goes, I'm here doing an audit for his workers' compensation. He owns a little security company. He goes, put me on the phone. And so I got the phone. He goes, remember that day? And I said, yeah, I remember that day. He goes, you were looking at your kids through a window or jail or hospital bed. He goes, I bet you're proud of you working those docks back then. Wow. I said, you're absolutely right. That led me to this. And so I think that's the issue as a young father. You can't just let that define the moment. You have to forecast and look what's ahead. What can you be? What can you do? What are you capable of? And what will you, if you fail, how can you reinvent yourself and do it again and start all over again?
So what would you say was to somebody that was in a similar situation where they have young kids and limited education and working on the docks? What would you tell that? What would you tell that guy?
If they're a young, healthy person, I'd say, man, you're the luckiest guy in the world. You're the luckiest guy in the world because you have the life's miracle ahead of you. You just don't see it. And for me, it's always been my faith has always been the biggest part of my character. And I at that time, I only saw my life story in the first 19 years of my life. God saw that story 60, 70, 80, 90 years in my life. And he was like, hey, hang in there. It's going to be okay. And so I would tell that young person, please focus on what's to be, not what is. Because what it is now does not define you. There's a lot of people. I mean, I've got a guy that I'm going to recognize him at the end of the next month as the Mayor's Servant Heart Award. I met him when he came out of prison. He came out of prison after doing 10 years in prison right after high school. And I met him, and he went into a men's recovery home, which I helped him. Then he graduated and went to Cerritos College, and I helped get him a scholarship. He graduated from Cerritos College. He's now going to USC on his way to try to become a CPA. So I was telling the story to one of my colleagues who's an attorney, and he said, hey, let me help you. Because one of his things as a CPA, he's a felon, so he can't be a CPA. Mm-hmm. And so he goes, let me see if I can help you overturn that felony conviction. Here's a guy that spent the first 10 years of his adult life in prison, but his life is totally turned. That didn't define him. He didn't go and do something else to put him back in prison. He changed life completely. And so that's why I would tell any young person that's facing the stages of life, and that stage where it looks impossible, it looks incomplete, it looks defeated, don't focus on now. Think about what's to come, what will be,
What are some of the ways, because you're a very busy man, you have a family, you're mayor. What are some things now that's helping you kind of stay balanced?
Well, I think that two things. I think my faith, as I mentioned, is the biggest part of my character. I'm a very strong man of faith. I think that my life was changed predominantly because of my relationship with God and the acceptance of the Lord in my life. I think that's changed me drastically. But also, I had two loving parents, my mom and dad. My dad graduated high school at 80 years old. My mom was the first in her family to ever go to high school. And so they put all six kids through private school and encouraged us all to go to college. I was the only one that struggled through it because I had a family. But my older brothers and sisters, they all had professional careers. And my dad told me, the day I got elected, my dad told me, now you got the job you wanted, don't mess it up. So that was his limited, primitive advice to me, but how profound that advice was. Yeah. Because so many elected officials, I think if their loving father would tell them that, don't get in trouble. They think about that before they do something stupid. They think about, man, my dad's watching. And so for me, that was, this was the next stepping stone in my life. I had raised my family. I started a business that grew to be a large company. I had retired from that company. My family's a legacy company, so it's on to the next generation to operate. I still own it, but they operate it. And now it's time to enter something new. I went through Bible college. I became a chaplain with the LA County Sheriff's Department. I love that. I still love it. And then running for office was a new idea of election. I had no idea what that looked like. But it was another opportunity for me to try. And I think that's one of the biggest things for me is, I love to try things new. And so I believe that if the Lord gives me the strength to walk, and I would say if I can walk, I can work. Yeah. So I believe that God gives me my strength to push forward.
Do you think, because one thing with men is that sometimes when a challenge is over,
yeah,
it's very easy to slip into some sort of depression.
Yeah.
And with men, it looks different. It's irritability, it's isolation, it's that kind of stuff. Do you think that men need some sort of purpose, need some sort of like goal to do, even once having a wife and having a career? Do you think that men need to have something?
Yeah. I think that men overall, we should learn. They say that men were we're the dragon slayers, right? The wife is the cave dweller. She makes our home beautiful, cozy, nice to come home to. And that's the old primitive way of looking at husband and wife. But I think if you're gonna, I tell this to married couples when I provide a wedding ceremony for a deputy or a soldier, a member of law enforcement or military. If I provide that, I take 6 or 7 months before the wedding, and I get to know them. My wife and I, we sit, have dinner with them, we counsel them, and we talk about 35 years of marriage. We talk about the idea of being involved with each other. We talk about, it's one thing, okay, you see a lot of young guys, I want to find the right woman and settle down and get married. Okay, then what? And so I would tell that young person that if you're going to do that and get married, then be the best husband. Be the best husband. Be the best father. And then because that's an ongoing process, right? And so, during that process, there's a lot of times, I told this story to one of my sons the other day. We and I were having this discussion. He's got a very stressful job. And I told him, I said, I'm going to tell you a story Mom told me years ago that helped me. I came home one day after being very stressed out at my job. I worked my 3 jobs, fighting traffic, come home. And I walked in the door, and that's before cell phones and email. And so I walked in the door, and the kids run towards me, and they climb all over me, and I didn't want to have anything to do with it. And I was just exhausted and grumpy and angry. And so I started to bark at my wife, and she said, hey, why don't you do me a favor and talk to me the way you talk to your friends, the guys you drink with, the guys you hang out with. And I realized right then that the only people that I trust are other people that risk their life with me. They're the only people that I could measure up to. And so when she said that to me, I said, wow, I've lost my confidant. I've lost the person that I speak with, that I counsel with. And so as a young husband and father, it was very profound what she said to me. So I told it to my son. I said, when you're on your way home from work and you got 45 minutes in traffic, maybe you ought to call the wife before you get there. Or call me. Or call some colleague, some older person, some pastor, some chaplain, and just have that conversation. So by the time you walk in the door, you feel better. So you're a better husband. And then tomorrow do it again. Before you know it, you've learned to, outwardly express your inward emotions.
Yeah. Yeah, that's some great advice there. Coming home and calling up that friend or somebody and being able to just have a laugh or just kind of change gears before you get home.
Yeah.
Is there any other things that you do to kind of reflect on things?
So I just started a new one this past Sunday, but I do a lot of writing. I believe that the Bible says that prayers are your inward emotions being expressed outward, and so that's one thing. I can sit and tell you, "Hey, Ronnie, I'm praying for you. I'm praying for you and your wife and your children," and you'll believe me because you trust me. I'll do that. But I could be saying, "Okay, yeah, sure," and I forget. I'm busy. I forget. And then tomorrow comes. I never pray for Ronnie. I never pray for his wife and kids. I forgot. And so the way to legitimize that effort, to document that effort, to make that, in my opinion, make that effort so much more meaningful is I take a pen to paper and I write that prayer out. I write that prayer to God. I write that prayer in Jesus' name. And I express my heartfelt feelings on paper. And then I will watch it. I'll watch it and monitor it. And that gives me the documented evidence to see God's hand move. So maybe I'm praying, for example, for my brother's wife who has stage 4 bladder cancer. I'm praying for her from the day he told me. I pray for the incident that he told me in tears. I pray with him on the phone and I write about that. And then I keep writing about so many months go by, and I remember again. I pray for her again, and then I pray when he called. He said, "Guess what? She's cancer free. Everything's great. They removed the stitches. They removed this and that. Everything's wonderful." And I saw in written format, I saw God's hand move of that miracle. So I do that. That's very therapeutic for me.
Yeah.
And for being a guy at my age, with 7 children, 10 grandkids, and a lot of responsibility of thousands of people around the world that call my family a paycheck. There's times where no one can help me, and I need to put that into written form, and that really helps me.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that we don't use as men is writing stuff down.
Yes.
And just having some sort of reflection.
Yeah.
I know meditation is a big thing with in therapy, but I think to start off with that is writing stuff down and using reflection. And
you get a chance to really go back. I have a book that I started in 2015. I finished it in 2007, almost 2017. It took me 2 years to finish that page by page prayer and chronicle and really put my prayers into writing. And I look back and I look at it. I think, man, it's like a novel. I read. I think, how scared was I? How terrified was I? When somebody say you should run for city council, I said, okay, sure. I had no idea what I was doing. And I think, Lord, you know what? Please help me and either remove my eyesight or help me win, but make sure I don't mess it up. And here we are. And and it's got my constant prayers that that I would never embarrass God no matter what, in my vocabulary, in my actions, and that I would leave this city better than the way I found it. And there's times where I question that. There's times where I say, oh, am I doing the right thing? Let me write this out. And there's also times I take that exercise and I share it with others. And I have other men that will come to me and say, my wife and I are having problems. And I'll say, let me read something to you. I read them the prayer I wrote for my marriage, me and my wife. Or I read a prayer that I wrote about me and my children, me and my grandchildren, or me and my father and mother. And before my father passed, the broken heart I had when my dad died. I mean, all those things, you share your heart with somebody, and it encourages them to share their heart with somebody else. Because that's the real therapy. I mean, we really, we all want to say we have it going on, everything's perfect, but in reality, we're human. We're human flesh. And the Bible says we're made in God's image, and I want to believe that God's heart hurts too when our heart hurts. So I think that the most important thing we can do is be kind. Learn to be kind. We raise our children, be polite, mind your manners, go to school, say our prayers, but we forget about being kind. And I think that that's one of the things as a result of that book, it made me kind. I wasn't always kind before. I was very opinionated, always forward, direct. I'm the winner, you're not. I'm going to take control, you're not. That was my personality. And so now, here we are, and I'm very proud of being kind. I like being kind to people. And I think that came out of that therapy of the written word.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Rick. I appreciate you sharing your story. And yeah, thank you.
Yep. My pleasure.